The sound of a silver fork hitting a porcelain plate usually signals a mistake. But in Luciano's that night, it signaled a death sentence. The room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. 30 of the most dangerous men in New York stopped breathing, their eyes locked on the shaking hands of a 22-year-old waitress named Amara. All she had done was pour water for an old man. But when she opened her mouth to apologize, she didn't speak English. She didn't even speak standard Italian. She spoke a dialect that hadn't been heard outside a specific Sicilian village since 1978. And the old man she spoke to? He was the only one left alive who knew what those words actually meant. If you walked past Amara Vitali on the street, you wouldn't look twice. That was by design. In a city that screamed for attention, Amara had mastered the art of being invisible. She wore her brunette hair in a tight, severe bun that pulled at her scalp, wore glasses she didn't actually need to dull the brightness of her amber eyes, and wore a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. She worked at Luciano's, a high-end Italian steakhouse in the financial district. It was the kind of place where a plate of pasta cost more than Amara's weekly rent, and the clientele treated the staff like moving furniture. That Tuesday started like any other Tuesday. The humidity in the kitchen was already sitting at 90%. The head chef, a volatile man named Pierre, who ironically wasn't French but from New Jersey, was screaming about the lack of fresh basil. "Amara, table 4 needs water. Table 7 needs bread," Pierre shouted, slamming a pan onto the burner. "Yes, chef," Amara whispered, keeping her head down. Amara wasn't just shy. She was terrified. She lived her life looking over her shoulder. Her grandmother, Nonna Rosa, had raised her in a tiny apartment in Queens with the curtains always drawn. Nonna Rosa was a woman of secrets, a woman who flinched when a car backfired, a woman who forbade Amara from ever speaking their native tongue in public. "English, Amara," Nonna would hiss, her gnarled hands gripping Amara's shoulders. "Outside this door, you are American. You know nothing of the old country. You know nothing of the blood." Amara obeyed. She learned to flatten her vowels. She learned to talk about the weather and the Mets. But at night, in the safety of their kitchen, Nonna Rosa would weep and speak in a tongue that sounded like rocks grinding together, a heavy, guttural Sicilian dialect that felt like ancient history. Amara absorbed it all. It was her lullaby. But Nonna Rosa had passed away 6 months ago, taking her secrets to the grave, leaving Amara alone in a world she didn't understand, armed only with a dialect she was forbidden to use. Around 7:30 p.m., the atmosphere in Luciano's shifted. It wasn't a gradual change, it was instant. The air grew heavy. The chatter in the dining room, usually a roar of investment bankers and tourists, dropped to a nervous murmur. The manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, ran into the kitchen, his face pale. "Clear the center section," Henderson hissed, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "They're here." "Who?" a busboy asked. "The Rinaldi family," Henderson whispered, as if saying the name too loud would summon a demon. The kitchen went silent. Even Chef Pierre stopped chopping. Everyone in New York knew the Rinaldis, or rather, they knew of them. They owned construction firms, shipping docks, and half the politicians in Albany. They were old money, blood money, and power wrapped in $3,000 suits. Leading the family now was Dante Rinaldi. At 32, he was the prince of the city. Dark hair, eyes like polished obsidian, and a reputation for being ruthless but fair. He was the face of the modern mob, legitimate, sleek, dangerous. But tonight, he wasn't alone. "They're bringing the old man," Henderson said, his voice trembling. "Don Salvatore is coming." A collective gasp went through the staff. Don Salvatore Rinaldi hadn't been seen in public for 5 years. He was a relic, the last of the old guard, a man who had survived turf wars that turned the streets of Palermo red in the 80s. He was rumored to be sick, dying, or perhaps just too dangerous to let out of the house. "I need my best server," Henderson said, his eyes scanning the terrified staff. "Jessica, you take the table." Jessica, a confident blonde who usually flirted her way to massive tips, shook her head vigorously. "No way. My hands are shaking just thinking about it. I'll drop the soup. I can't do it." "Mark? I owe a bookie in Jersey," Mark said, backing away. "If they recognize me, I'm dead." Henderson groaned. He looked around, desperate. His eyes landed on the dishwasher station, then moved to the corner where Amara was polishing wine glasses, trying to blend into the wall. "Amara!" Henderson snapped. She froze. "Sir? You're up. Take the center table. You're quiet, you're efficient, and you don't flirt. Just pour the wine, serve the food, and don't look them in the eye." "Mr. Henderson, please," Amara begged, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm not good with important people." "You want to keep this job?" Henderson barked. "Get your apron straight. They're walking in." Amara had no choice. She smoothed her apron, took a deep breath that did nothing to calm her nerves, and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't know it yet, but she was walking straight into her past. The dining room of Luciano's was dimly lit, designed for intimacy, but the center table felt like a stage under a spotlight. 6 men sat there. 5 of them were massive, their suit jackets straining against their shoulders. They scanned the room with predatory eyes, checking exits, checking hands, checking reflections in the windows. In the middle of the table sat Dante Rinaldi. He was even more striking in person. He sat with a relaxed confidence, one hand resting on the table, tapping a rhythm on the tablecloth. He wasn't looking at the room. He was looking at his father. Don Salvatore Rinaldi sat at the head of the table in a wheelchair. He was a shrunken man, his skin like parchment paper, spotted with age. He wore a breathing tube in his nose, connected to a small oxygen tank hooked to the chair. But his eyes were alert, milky blue, and filled with a cold, simmering rage. He looked like a king who was tired of his kingdom. Amara approached the table, clutching a pitcher of ice water. Her hands were trembling so badly, the ice rattled against the glass. "Don't look up. Just pour." "Be invisible," she told herself. She moved to the first bodyguard. "Pour. Move." The second bodyguard. "Pour. Move." She reached Dante. As she poured his water, she felt his gaze on her. It was heavy, physical. He wasn't checking her out. He was assessing her, like a wolf sniffing the air. She kept her eyes on the water level, terrified of spilling a drop on his cuff. "Thank you," Dante said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth as velvet. "You're welcome," Amara whispered, barely audible. She moved to the head of the table, to Don Salvatore. The old man was muttering to himself. He was looking at the menu with disdain. He slapped the leather-bound book shut and looked up at his son. "Che schifo," Don Salvatore grumbled. "Disgusting. This is not Italian food. This is plastic for tourists." He spoke in Italian, but it was standard Italian, heavily accented. Dante sighed, leaning forward. "Papa, please. This is the best steakhouse in the city. Just try the veal." "Veal?" Salvatore scoffed. "In America, they feed the cows corn and lies. I want real food. I want flavor." Amara finished pouring his water and tried to back away, but the Don's hand shot out. For a dying man, he was incredibly fast. He gripped Amara's wrist. The bodyguards tensed. Dante sat up straighter. Amara gasped, nearly dropping the pitcher. She froze, looking down at the old man's hand, gripping her uniform. "You!" Salvatore barked in English, his voice raspy. "Girl, where is the bread? The bread is cold. Why is the bread cold?" I can get fresh bread, sir," Amara stammered. "Fresh?" Salvatore laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "You don't know what fresh is. You are American. You eat garbage." He released her wrist with a shove. "Papa, leave the girl alone," Dante said sharply. "She's just doing her job." "She is slow," Salvatore grumbled, switching back to Italian. "Look at her, scared of her own shadow, weak, like everyone in this country." He looked at Amara, his milky eyes narrowing. He pointed a shaking finger at the wine list. "Tell me, girl," he sneered in Italian, "do you even know what a Nero d'Avola is? Or do you just serve what the boss tells you?" Amara knew she should just nod and leave. She knew she should play the dumb American waitress. But something about his tone, the arrogance, the dismissal of her worth, sparked a fire in her belly. It was the same fire Nonna Rosa had when she argued with the butcher. Without thinking, the filter in her brain slipped. "The Nero d'Avola is from the southern slope," Amara said. But she didn't say it in English, and she didn't say it as in standard Italian. She spoke in the dialect. It wasn't the Italian taught in schools. It was Siciliano stretto, specifically the dialect of the inland mountains near Corleone. It was a language of farmers and soldiers, guttural, chopping the ends of words, thick with Arabic influence and ancient slang. "U vino è buono, Don Salvatore, ma se tu voliti a verità, stupani un sapi rinenti." The wine is good, Don Salvatore, but if you want the truth, this bread tastes like nothing. The silence that followed was violent. The fork dropped. It fell from the hand of the bodyguard sitting to Dante's right. It clattered against the china, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent restaurant. Don Salvatore's eyes, previously milky and tired, snapped wide open. The haze of age evaporated instantly. He stared at Amara, his mouth slightly agape. Dante Rinaldi slowly stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. The entire restaurant had gone quiet, sensing the sudden shift in gravity at the center table. Mr. Henderson, watching from the service station, looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Dante looked at Amara. His expression wasn't angry. It was bewildered, bordering on shocked. "What did you just say?" Dante asked, his voice low. Amara realized what she had done. The blood drained from her face. She took a step back, clutching the water pitcher to her chest like a shield. I apologize, sir. I will get the manager," she squeaked in English. "Fermate." "Stop!" The command didn't come from Dante. It came from Don Salvatore. The old man slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. He wheeled his chair back, turning it to face her fully. He looked her up and down, analyzing her with a terrifying intensity. He looked at her shoes, her hands, her cheekbones. "Come ti chiami?" "What is your name?" he asked. But he asked it in the dialect. He matched her accent perfectly. Amara's heart was beating so hard, she thought they could hear it. She couldn't lie. Not in this language. It felt like a sin to lie in the tongue of her grandmother. "Amara," she whispered, answering in the dialect. "Amara Vitale." The name hung in the air. Don Salvatore's face paled. He looked at Dante. "Vitale," he repeated softly. "Did you hear that, Dante? Vitale." Dante frowned. "It's a common name, Papa." "Not with that accent," Salvatore hissed. "That is not a Brooklyn accent. That is not a Palermo accent. That is the accent of the Old Valley, the accent of the ghost village." He turned back to Amara. "Who taught you to speak this way, child? Who is your father?" I don't have a father," Amara said, her voice shaking. "My grandmother raised me. Nonna Rosa." Don Salvatore gripped the arms of his wheelchair. His knuckles turned white. "Rosa," he whispered. "Rosa Vitale." Amara nodded slowly. Don Salvatore let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He looked up at the ceiling, crossing himself. "Madonna mia! After 40 years!" He looked at Dante. "Give her a chair." "Papa, we are in the middle of dinner." "Give her a chair!" Salvatore roared, his voice booming with a strength that belied his frail body. "She sits with us. Now!" Dante signaled to a bodyguard. The large man immediately grabbed a chair from a nearby table and placed it next to the Don. "Sit," Dante said to Amara. It wasn't a request. Amara looked at Mr. Henderson in the distance. He was shaking his head frantically, mouthing, "Run," or maybe, "Stay." She couldn't tell. She was trapped. She sat down. She was a waitress in a cheap uniform, sitting at the most powerful table in New York City. Don Salvatore leaned in close. He smelled of cigars and old cologne. He reached out and took her hand. His skin was rough, like sandpaper. "Your grandmother," Salvatore said, speaking in English now, but slowly, as if testing the words. "She had a scar. Here?" He traced a line along his own jawline. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, from a broken bottle. She said she fell when she was a girl." Salvatore shook his head slowly. "She didn't fall. She stood in front of a shotgun meant for me." The table went dead silent again. Dante stared at his father, then at the waitress. "Papa," Dante said, his voice tight. "What are you talking about?" "You think you know our history, Dante?" Salvatore said, his eyes never leaving Amara's face. "You know the business. You know the money. You don't know the blood." He squeezed Amara's hand. "This girl, her grandmother was the only woman I ever loved. And 40 years ago, I was told she died in the fire that burned down the family estate in Corleone. I buried an empty coffin." Amara pulled her hand away, shocked. No, that's not true. She never mentioned you. She hated men like you." "She hated me?" Salvatore asked, a sad smile touching his lips. "Or did she hate that I let them drive her away?" "I don't know who you are," Amara said, standing up. "I just want to get back to work." "Sit down, Amara," Dante said. His voice was softer now. He was looking at her differently. He wasn't seeing a waitress anymore. He was looking for a resemblance. He was looking at her amber eyes. "You have his eyes," Dante said quietly. Amara looked at Dante. "What?" "You have my father's eyes," Dante said. "The exact same shade." The implication hit Amara like a physical blow. She looked at the old man in the wheelchair, the cold, hard man who terrified the city. And she saw it. The shape of the nose, the set of the jaw, and the eyes. She wasn't just a waitress serving the Rinaldi family. She was the Rinaldi family. And in the shadows of the restaurant, a man in a waiter's uniform, who had been quietly observing the table from the service station, pulled a phone from his pocket. He typed a quick message. "Target located." The old man found the girl. Plan B is in effect. He hit send. The waiter wasn't working for the restaurant, and he wasn't working for the Rinaldis. The night was just beginning, and the dinner was about to get much, much worse. The revelation that Amara might be blood-related to the Rinaldi crime family hung heavy in the air, stifling the breath of everyone at the table. Dante was staring at her, his mind racing through decades of family secrets, trying to piece together the timeline. But Amara wasn't looking at Dante, and she wasn't looking at Don Salvatore. She was looking at the waiter near the kitchen door. Her grandmother, Nonna Rosa, had been a paranoid woman. She had taught Amara to notice details that other people ignored. "Look at the hands, Amara," she would say, while they sat on a park bench. "A carpenter has calluses on his palms. A tailor has prick marks on his fingers. A killer? A killer has restless hands. Amara watched the waiter. He was new. She didn't know his name. He was holding a tray of silverware, but his knuckles were white, and he wasn't looking at the tables he was supposed to be bussing. He was looking at the ceiling, checking the reflection in the brass light fixtures. More importantly, he was wearing expensive shoes. Luciano's provided standard, non-slip black shoes for the staff. Ugly, comfortable, rubber-soled. This man was wearing Italian leather loafers with hard soles. Clack, clack, clack. He was walking toward the center table, fast. Amara's instinct, honed by 20 years of living with a woman who feared the dark, took over. She didn't think. She moved. The waiter reached into his apron. He didn't pull out a corkscrew. He pulled out a ceramic knife, white, jagged, and invisible to metal detectors. He lunged for the exposed neck of Don Salvatore. "No!" Amara screamed. She grabbed the heavy crystal water pitcher she had been holding and swung it with both hands. Crash! The pitcher connected with the assassin's temple just as he began his downward arc. The heavy glass shattered, sending ice water and shards exploding everywhere. The assassin grunted, his aim knocked off course. The knife slashed down, not into Salvatore's neck, but into the sleeve of his jacket, slicing the fabric but missing the flesh. The table erupted. "Gun!" one of the bodyguards roared. Dante was moving before the glass hit the floor. He kicked the chair out from under him, grabbed the assassin by the throat, and slammed him onto the table, scattering plates of calamari and steak. The assassin was strong. He thrashed, slashing wildly with the ceramic knife. Dante caught the man's wrist, twisting it with a sickening crack, forcing the knife to drop. But it wasn't over. From the front entrance, 3 men in heavy trench coats burst in. They didn't bother with knives. They pulled MP5 submachine guns from under their coats. "Get the Don down!" Dante screamed, pulling a silver pistol from his waistband. The restaurant turned into a war zone. Customers screamed and dove under tables. The sound of automatic gunfire shredded the expensive atmosphere. Glass exploded. Wood splintered. Amara was frozen, standing over the groaning man she had just brained with a pitcher. "Girl, move!" Don Salvatore barked. He couldn't walk, but he could wheel. He spun his chair with surprising strength, knocking over a busboy to create a barrier. Dante fired 2 shots. Double tap. One of the gunmen at the door dropped. "Back exit! Kitchen!" Dante ordered his men. "Marco, take the point! Luca, get the chair!" One of the massive bodyguards, Luca, grabbed the handles of Salvatore's wheelchair and began sprinting toward the kitchen. Dante turned to Amara. She was shaking, staring at the blood on the tablecloth. "Amara!" Dante grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. "If you stay here, you die. They saw your face. You're part of this now." I have to clock out," she stammered, her brain short-circuiting from shock. "You're clocking out permanently," Dante growled. He wrapped an arm around her waist, lifting her nearly off her feet, and dragged her toward the kitchen swing doors. They burst into the kitchen. It was chaos. Chef Pierre was cowering behind the stove. The dishwashers were running out the back alley door. "Not the alley," Dante said, stopping Luca. "They'll have a sniper on the fire escape. It's a kill box." "Then where, boss?" Luca asked, panic edging into his voice. The gunfire from the dining room was getting closer. They were breaching the perimeter. Dante looked at the walk-in freezer. Then he looked at the service elevator used for garbage disposal. "The trash chute," Dante said. "The what?" Amara gasped. "The service elevator goes to the sub-basement. It connects to the subway tunnels. It's the only way out unseen." Dante kicked the elevator button. The doors groaned open. It smelled of rotting fish and stale beer. "Get him in," Dante ordered. Luca shoved the wheelchair into the small, grimy elevator. Dante shoved Amara in next to the old man. "Dante!" Salvatore yelled. "Get in!" I have to buy you time, Dante said, reloading his pistol. I'll hold the kitchen door. No, Amara yelled. It surprised her. She didn't know why she cared. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was the way he had looked at her earlier. There are 3 of them. You'll die. Dante looked at her. For a second, the hard mask of the mob boss slipped. He looked tired. Go. He hit the button to close the doors. As the metal doors slid shut, Amara saw the kitchen doors burst open. 2 men with guns ran in. Dante raised his weapon, his face set in a grim line of determination. Bang! 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 The door sealed. The elevator descended into the earth, carrying a waitress, a dying godfather, and a bodyguard, leaving the Prince of New York behind to face the wolves alone. Amara slumped against the dirty metal wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She looked at Don Salvatore. The old man was adjusting his oxygen tube. He looked calm. Terrifyingly calm. You have a good arm, Niputi. Granddaughter? He said in the dialect. Your grandmother taught you how to hit. Amara looked at her hands. They were covered in someone else's blood. Is he dead? She whispered. Is Dante dead? Salvatore closed his eyes. Dante Rinaldi is the devil's favorite son. Hell isn't ready for him yet. The elevator hit the bottom with a thud. The next 3 hours were a blur of shadows and motion. They moved through the damp, rat-infested service tunnels that ran beneath the financial district. Luca pushed the wheelchair, swearing softly in Italian every time the wheels got stuck in the muck. Amara walked beside them, still in her stained uniform, shivering in the subterranean cold. They emerged in a parking garage 3 blocks away, where a nondescript black van was waiting. It was a clean vehicle, no plates, registered to a shell company in Delaware. They drove north, out of the city, away from the sirens that were now wailing all over Manhattan. They ended up at a safe house in Cold Spring, an hour north of the city. It wasn't a bunker. It was a modern architectural marvel of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the Hudson River. It was isolated, surrounded by dense forest, and, according to Luca, fortified like a fortress. Amara was led to a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. A maid, who looked more like a soldier in a housekeeping uniform, gave her fresh clothes, grey sweatpants and a cashmere sweater. Amara showered, scrubbing her skin until it was red, trying to wash off the feeling of the assassin's blood. When she finally walked out into the massive living room, the sun was beginning to rise over the river. Don Salvatore was there, sitting by the fireplace. He had a blanket over his legs, and Dante was there. Amara stopped in her tracks. He was alive. He was standing by the window, holding a glass of scotch. He had a bandage wrapped around his left bicep, spotting red. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt rolled up to his elbows, stained with soot and grime. He looked exhausted, dangerous, and incredibly relieved to see her. You made it, Amara said softly. Dante turned. His eyes swept over her, lingering on her face. I told you, hell wasn't ready. You were shot, she said, nodding at his arm. Just a graze, a parting gift from the Russian, Dante said. He took a sip of the scotch. The police are calling it a gang-related dispute. Luciano's is closed for renovations. The Russian? Amara asked. Who were they? The Volkov Syndicate, Dante said, his voice hardening. They've been trying to push into our shipping lanes for months. But tonight was personal. They knew Papa was there. Someone sold us out. Someone close, Salvatore croaked from the fireplace. Dante nodded. I'm scrubbing the ranks. But until I find the leak, we stay here. No phones. No internet. We are ghosts. He walked over to Amara. He stood close enough that she could smell the gunpowder and scotch on him. We need to talk about you, Amara. I want to go home, Amara said, though she knew it was a lie. She had no home. Her apartment was probably being watched. You can't, Dante said. The Volkovs saw you save my father. You're a hero to us and a target to them. If you go back to Queens, you'll be dead by morning. So I'm a prisoner? You're a guest, Dante corrected. A guest who happens to be family. Amara looked at Salvatore. Am I? The old man waved his hand. Veni ca. Come here. Amara walked to the fireplace and sat on the ottoman across from him. 42 years ago, Salvatore began, his voice raspy. I wasn't the Don. I was just a soldier. And your grandmother, Rosa, she was the daughter of a baker. She was beautiful, fiery. She didn't care about my money. She cared about my soul. He stared into the fire. We were in love. But my father, the old Don, he had other plans. He arranged a marriage for me, a political alliance with the Genovese family. I refused. I told him I would run away with Rosa. What happened? Amara whispered. The fire, Salvatore said darkly. My father sent men to burn down her house, to scare her. But the fire got out of control. They told me she died in the flames. They showed me a body, burnt beyond recognition. I buried her, and I turned my heart to stone. I married the woman my father chose. I built this empire on my misery. He looked at Amara with tears in his eyes. But she didn't die. She ran. She ran to America. She was pregnant. Amara's breath hitched. My father. Your father was my son, Salvatore said. My firstborn. Did Rosa ever talk about him? She said he died in a car accident when I was a baby, Amara said. She said my mother died with him. A car accident, Salvatore scoffed. Or another lie to keep you safe. I need to find out what happened to him. But looking at you, there is no doubt. You are a Rinaldi. The weight of the name settled on her shoulders. Rinaldi, the name that made people cross the street. So, Amara said, looking at Dante. That makes us... Dante stepped forward quickly. It makes us nothing, he said sharply. Amara looked confused. But if you're his son... I'm not his son, Dante said. The silence in the room was heavy. I was adopted, Dante said, his voice devoid of emotion. My biological father was Salvatore's underboss. He died taking a bullet for Salvatore 10 years ago. Salvatore took me in, raised me, trained me. I call him Papa out of respect. But we share no blood. He looked at Amara, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. We are not related, Amara. The tension in the room shifted instantly. It went from a family reunion to something else. Something electrically charged. Good to know, Amara whispered, her face flushing. Indeed, Don Salvatore muttered, a small, sly smile playing on his lips. He might be dying, but he wasn't blind. He saw the way Dante looked at her. He saw the spark. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the living room swung open. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a tactical vest and carrying a laptop. This was Nero, the family's head of intelligence. Dante, Nero said, his face pale. We have a problem. What is it? Dante asked, turning away from Amara. I pulled the security footage from the restaurant. I ran facial recognition on the waiter you took down. And? He's not Russian, Nero said. He's Sicilian, specifically from Corleone. Salvatore sat up straight. From the village? Yes, Don Salvatore, but that's not the worst part. Nero turned his laptop screen around so they could see. He had a tattoo on his wrist. Look. On the screen was a grainy image of the unconscious assassin. On the inside of his wrist was a small, intricate tattoo of a black spider. Salvatore gasped. His face went grey. He grabbed his chest. "Papa!" Dante rushed to him. "Il Ragno!" Salvatore wheezed. "The spider!" "Who are they?" Amara asked, sensing the terror in the room. "A myth," Dante said grimly. "An ancient brotherhood of assassins from the old country. They don't work for money. They work for a blood oath. They were supposed to be extinct." "They are not extinct," Salvatore whispered, "and they don't hunt for territory. They hunt for bloodlines." He looked at Amara with pure fear. "They are here to finish what they started 40 years ago. They are here to wipe out the Vitale line. They aren't just after me, Amara. They are here for you." Dante racked the slide of his pistol. "Then they'll have to go through me," Dante said. He turned to Amara. "Pack your things. This safe house isn't safe anymore. If the spider is hunting, nowhere is safe." "Where are we going?" Amara asked. Dante looked at her, his jaw set. "We're going to the only place where we can kill a ghost," Dante said. "We're going to Sicily." The Gulf Stream GO-50 touched down on a private airstrip just outside Palermo as the sun began to bleed into the Mediterranean Sea. The air here was different, heavier, smelling of salt, scorched earth, and jasmine. Amara stepped onto the tarmac, shielding her eyes. She had never left New York before, yet everything here felt hauntingly familiar. The shape of the mountains, the color of the dust. It was the landscape of Nonna Rosa's stories. "Stay close," Dante said, his hand resting on the small of her back. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her, a stark contrast to the exhaustion of the flight. They didn't go to a hotel. A convoy of 3 armored SUVs was waiting. Don Salvatore was lifted into the middle vehicle. Dante and Amara sat on either side of him. "Where are we going?" Amara asked as they sped away from the coast, climbing higher into the rugged inland mountains. "A casa. Home," Salvatore whispered. They drove for 2 hours, past olive groves that looked like twisted old men and villages that seemed carved out of the rock itself. Finally, the convoy turned onto a dirt road that wound up a steep hill toward a ruined structure. It was the skeleton of a grand estate. Blackened stone walls stood like jagged teeth against the sky. Weeds grew through the cracks in the marble floor. "The Vitale estate," Dante said quietly. "This is where the fire happened. This is where you were supposed to have died." They exited the cars. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the oppressive heat of the Sicilian evening. Dante's men fanned out, their hands hovering near their weapons. Dante stayed glued to Amara's side. "Why are we here?" Amara asked, her voice trembling. "If the spiders are hunting us, isn't this a trap?" "It is a trap," Dante said calmly. "That's why we're here. We are the bait." Amara looked at him, shocked. "You used us as bait?" "I need to draw them out," Dante said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "The spider is an assassin cult. They are ambush predators. They won't attack a fortress. They'll attack here, at the site of their original sin. And what if they kill us?" Dante turned to her. He took her face in his hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. The intensity in his obsidian eyes stole the breath from her lungs. "I will burn this entire island to ash before I let them touch you," he vowed. "Do you understand me, Amara? I didn't bring you here to die. I brought you here to end this so you can live." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and the looming shadow of death. It tasted of danger and promise. Amara melted into him, gripping the lapels of his shirt. For a moment, the ruins, the Mafia, the assassins, it all faded. There was only Dante. A sharp whistle from Nero broke them apart. Movement, Nero signaled. Northridge. Dante pulled away, his face instantly shifting back to the mask of the Don. He pulled his weapon. Get inside the ruins. Go to the cellar entrance. Papa knows the way. They moved into the shell of the house. Salvatore pointed to a heavy iron grate in the floor, hidden beneath overgrown vines. The wine cellar, Salvatore wheezed. The walls are stone, safe. Luca heaved the grate open. But as they prepared to descend, a voice echoed from the shadows of the courtyard. Benvenuto a casa, Salvatore. Welcome home, Salvatore. Dante spun around, gun raised. Emerging from the darkness of the burnt arches were 12 men. They wore modern tactical gear, but their faces were covered by masks made of black fabric, stitched with the symbol of a red spider. In the center stood a man with no mask. He was old, perhaps older than Salvatore, leaning on a cane made of black ebony. Salvatore gasped. Lucio? The old man smiled. It was a cruel, twisting thing. You look terrible, old friend. The guilt has eaten you alive, hasn't it? Don Lucio Vieira, Dante said, recognizing the face from intelligence files. The head of the Vieira crime family. You died in 1990. I evolved, Lucio said. I became the spider, the web weaver. He looked at Amara, his eyes widened with a sickening hunger. Bella, Lucio purred. You look just like her Rosa. You started the fire, Amara said, her voice ringing clear in the ruins. She wasn't shaking anymore. The fear had calcified into anger. You burned this house. I burned it because she chose him, Lucio screamed, pointing his cane at Salvatore. I offered her the world, and she chose this peasant soldier. So I took everything from him. I made him believe she was dead. I made him suffer for 40 years. And now? Dante asked, stepping in front of Amara. Now I finish the bloodline, Lucio said. He raised his hand. Kill the men. Keep the girl. I want her to scream just like her grandmother did. The 12 assassins raised their weapons. Dante didn't flinch. He just smiled. You made one mistake, Lucio, Dante said. And what is that? You assumed we were alone. Dante pressed a button on his watch. Boom. The ridges surrounding the estate erupted. Flares shot into the sky, turning the night into day. From the tree line, dozens of Rinaldi soldiers emerged, weapons blazing. Snipers on the distant hills opened fire. Ambush the ambush, Dante growled. Kill them all. The night sky over Corleone didn't just light up, it shattered. When Dante pressed the detonator, the ridges surrounding the crumbling Vitale estate erupted in a blinding cascade of magnesium flares and synchronized explosions. The shockwave knocked the wind out of Amara's lungs, forcing her to crouch behind a slab of blackened marble that had once been a grand archway. The ruins, which had stood silent for 40 years, were suddenly screaming. "Keep your head down!" Dante roared, his voice barely audible over the deafening rattle of automatic gunfire. He was a blur of lethal precision. Standing exposed amidst the falling debris, Dante fired his weapon with a cold, rhythmic cadence. Bang! Bang! A mercenary on the upper wall crumpled. Bang! Bang! Another shadow dropped from the trellis. But the assassins of the Spider were not street thugs. They were an elite paramilitary relic. They recovered from the initial shock instantly. Bullets began to chip away at Amara's cover, sending stinging shards of stone flying into her cheeks. "We're pinned!" Nero screamed from the left flank, reloading his rifle. "They have the high ground on the east wall!" Amara looked across the courtyard. Don Salvatore Rinaldi, the frail old man who needed oxygen to breathe, had undergone a terrifying transformation. He wasn't hiding. He had wheeled his chair into the open, the firelight reflecting in his milky eyes. In his hand was a heavy, vintage revolver. a cannon of a gun. "Veni qua, vigliacchi!" "Come here, cowards," Salvatore bellowed, firing a shot that took a masked assassin in the shoulder. The recoil nearly tipped his chair, but the old lion didn't flinch. He was reclaiming his past with every pull of the trigger. "He's going to get himself killed!" Amara cried, grabbing Dante's sleeve. "He's buying us time!" Dante gritted out, snapping a fresh magazine into his pistol. "Look, the helicopter!" Through the smoke, Amara saw the sleek, black shape of an extraction helicopter descending toward the overgrown gardens behind the main house, and limping toward it, flanked by his 2 remaining elite guards, was Don Lucio Vieira. The man who had burned her grandmother's life to ash was escaping. "He's too far," Dante cursed, gauging the distance through the hail of bullets. "If I break cover to chase him, the snipers on the wall will cut me in half." Amara's mind raced. She looked at the ruins around her. The layout was chaotic, a maze of collapsed roofs and walls. But in her mind, she didn't see the ruins. She saw the blueprints Nonna Rosa had drawn on napkins in their queen's kitchen. She saw the stories. The kitchen was the heart of the house, Amara. But beneath the heart, there were veins. The servants used a tunnel to move wine and grain to the stables so the guests wouldn't see the labor. "The veins," Amara whispered. "What?" Dante snapped, ducking as a bullet ricocheted off the pillar next to his head. "The tunnel!" Amara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "There's a service tunnel. It runs from the sub-cellar under the kitchen directly to the stables. It comes out behind the landing zone." Dante looked at her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "My grandmother walked it 1,000 times," Amara said, her fear replaced by a sudden, crystalline clarity. "I can find the entrance." Dante didn't hesitate. He trusted her. "Nero, cover fire, now!" As Nero and the Rinaldi soldiers unleashed a wall of lead to suppress the enemy snipers, Dante grabbed Amara's hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the kill zone, bodies bent low. Dust choked the air. They scrambled over piles of rubble, sliding into the shell of what used to be the great kitchen. The floor was rotted, revealing gaping holes into the darkness below. "Where?" Dante demanded. Amara scanned the floor. She looked for the remains of the hearth. "There, under the prep table." Dante kicked aside a massive, charred wooden beam. Beneath it lay a rusted iron trapdoor, fused shut by time and heat. "Stand back," Dante ordered. He fired 2 shots into the hinges and stomped on the iron. With a screech of tearing metal, the door gave way, revealing a pitch-black chute. "Ladies first," Dante said, a grim smile touching his lips. Amara jumped. She landed in soft, damp earth 6 feet down. The air here was stale, smelling of wet rot and 40-year-old smoke. Dante dropped down beside her, clicking on the tactical light mounted to his weapon. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow, stone-walled corridor festooned with cobwebs and tree roots that had broken through the ceiling. "It's tight," Dante said. "Stay behind me." "No," Amara said, pushing past him. "I know the turns. You watch our backs." They ran. The tunnel was a nightmare of claustrophobia. Rats scurried away from their footsteps. Roots snagged at Amara's hair. But she didn't slow down. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not just from exertion, but from a strange sense of homecoming. She was running through the veins of her ancestors. She was claiming her inheritance. "Stop!" Amara gasped, skidding to a halt. The tunnel ended in a wooden door that was practically disintegrated. "This is it, the stable hatch." Dante killed the light. "Quiet now." He kicked the wood. It crumbled silently. They emerged into the tall, dry grass behind the stone stables. The noise of the battle was muffled here, distant. But directly ahead, the whine of the helicopter turbine was a high-pitched scream. 50 yards away, the helicopter was hovering a few feet off the ground, kicking up a storm of dust. Lucio Vieira was limping toward the open door, his cane discarded, his face twisted in a rictus of pain and triumph. He was alone. His guards had stayed back at the wall to hold off Salvatore. "Lucio!" Dante's voice was a thunderclap. The old man spun around, shock registering on his face. He fumbled for the submachine gun slung across his chest. Dante didn't give him the chance. He holstered his own weapon and sprinted forward. This wasn't about a clean kill anymore. This was primal. Lucio managed to raise the gun and fire a spray of bullets. Zip, zip. Dante dove, rolling through the grass. A bullet grazed his thigh, tearing the fabric of his tactical pants, but he didn't stop. He launched himself at the old man, tackling him with the force of a freight train. The two men hit the hard, dry earth. The submachine gun skittered away into the darkness. Dante was younger, stronger, but Lucio fought with the desperate, clawing viciousness of a cornered rat. He jammed his thumb into Dante's wound, making the younger man roar in pain. Lucio pulled a hidden knife from his boot and slashed at Dante's throat. Dante caught Lucio's wrist just inches from his jugular. They froze there, locked in a contest of strength, trembling with exertion. "You die today, boy," Lucio hissed, his spittle hitting Dante's face. "Just like your father. I will finish the Rinaldi line right here in the dirt." Amara stood at the edge of the grass. She saw the knife inching closer to Dante's throat. She saw the blood soaking Dante's leg. She looked down. The submachine gun Lucio had dropped was lying near her feet. It was heavy, cold, an alien object in hands that were used to carrying porcelain plates and wine glasses. She picked it up. It felt wrong, and then it felt right. "Let him go," Amara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a terrifying weight. Lucio looked up, distracted for a fraction of a second. Dante used the opening. He head-butted Lucio, the sound of cartilage cracking sickeningly loud. Lucio cried out, dropping the knife. Dante rolled off him, gasping for air, clutching his bleeding leg. Lucio scrambled backward, trying to reach for the knife again. Click! Amara racked the bolt of the submachine gun, leveling it at Lucio's chest. Lucio froze on his knees. He looked up at the girl in the torn cashmere sweater, covered in dirt and soot. He looked into her amber eyes and saw a ghost. "Rosa," he whispered, delirious. "My name," Amara said, her voice steady, "is Amara Vitale, and this is my house." Lucio began to laugh, a wet, bubbling sound. "Go ahead, little waitress. Do it. Pull the trigger. Become a murderer like us. Stain your soul." Dante struggled to his feet, limping to Amara's side. He reached for his own gun. "I'll do it, Amara. Don't carry this weight." "No," Amara said. She didn't look at Dante. She kept her eyes locked on Lucio. "He burned my history. He made me live in fear. He made my grandmother die of a broken heart. Shoot me," Lucio screamed, spreading his arms wide. "Send me to hell. I'll wait for you there." Amara tightened her finger on the trigger. The rage was a hot coal in her chest. It would be so easy. Just a twitch of a muscle, and the monster would be gone. But then she remembered Nonna Rosa. She remembered the nights in the kitchen, the softness of the dough, the gentleness of her hands. "We are not them, Amara," Nonna had said. "We survive. We do not destroy." Amara exhaled slowly. She lowered the barrel of the gun by 6 inches. "I am not a murderer," she said, in the thick, ancient dialect of the mountains. "I am a Vitale, and we are better than you." Brrrrt. She pulled the trigger, a short, controlled burst. Lucio shrieked as the bullets shattered his right kneecap and shin. He collapsed into the dust, writhing in agony, clutching his ruined leg. He wasn't dead, but he would never walk again. He would never run. He was broken. The helicopter pilot, seeing the tide turn and the Rinaldi reinforcements pouring over the hill, panicked. The engine roared and the bird lifted off, banking sharp and disappearing into the night, leaving the spider leader alone in the dirt. Dante looked at the sobbing man, then at Amara. He saw the tremble in her hands, now that the adrenaline was fading. He gently pried the heavy gun from her fingers and tossed it aside. "You didn't kill him," Dante said softly, awe in his voice. "Death is too fast," Amara whispered, watching the police lights flashing in the valley below. The carabinieri were finally coming. Let him live in a cage. Let him watch us rebuild everything he tried to burn. Dante pulled her into his chest. He didn't care about the blood, the dirt, or the pain in his leg. He buried his face in her hair. "Remind me," Dante murmured against her neck, "never to make you angry." Amara let out a shaky laugh, leaning into him. "Let's go home, Dante." 3 months later. The reopening of Luciano's was not just a dinner service. It was a coronation. The paparazzi were lined up 3 deep outside the velvet ropes on Wall Street. Flashbulbs popped like strobe lights as the city's elite, senators, hedge fund managers, and celebrities fought for a reservation. Inside, the restaurant had changed. The stiff, dark wood was replaced with warm, golden lighting and exposed brick. It felt less like a fortress and more like a home. At the center table, the place of honor, sat Don Salvatore. He looked 10 years younger. The oxygen tank was gone, replaced by a glass of deep red wine. He was laughing, actually laughing, with Nero and Luca. Dante Rinaldi stood on the balcony, overlooking the main dining floor. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, but his eyes were constantly searching the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dante announced, his voice silencing the room instantly. "Thank you for coming. Tonight marks a new chapter for the Rinaldi family, and for this establishment." He gestured to the grand staircase. "Please welcome the owner of Luciano's." Amara descended the stairs. The room gasped. The shy, invisible girl with the oversized uniform and the tight bun was gone. In her place was a vision of power. She wore a floor-length gown of emerald silk that shimmered under the lights. Her hair hung in loose, dark waves around her shoulders. She wore no jewelry, except for a simple gold chain, her grandmother's. She moved with a grace that commanded attention. She wasn't walking. She was gliding. She reached the bottom of the stairs where Dante was waiting. He offered her his hand. She took it, her grip firm, her fingers interlacing with his. "They're all staring," Amara whispered, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. "Let them stare," Dante replied, pulling her close. "They've never seen a queen before." Amara turned to the crowd. She spotted the table where her old manager, Mr. Henderson, was standing, looking terrified and impressed. She winked at him. "Welcome to Luciano's," Amara said, her voice clear and confident, echoing to the back of the room. "Please, eat, drink, and try the bread. It's a family recipe." The room erupted in applause. Dante leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "You realize," he murmured, "that by sparing Lucio you made the news. They're calling you the Mercy of Manhattan." "Let them call me whatever they want," Amara said, turning to face him. Her amber eyes locked onto his obsidian ones. "As long as you call me yours." Dante smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that lit up his dangerous face. "Sempre, always," he whispered. And there, in the center of the empire she had helped save, the mob boss kissed the waitress. It wasn't a kiss for the cameras. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how dark the world got, they would face it together. The invisible girl had finally been seen, and she liked what she saw in the mirror. And that is the story of how a single phrase in an ancient dialect saved a life and uncovered a 40-year-old secret. Amara went from an invisible waitress to the queen of a criminal empire, not by changing who she was, but by embracing where she came from. It reminds us that our history, no matter how hidden, is always part of our strength. What did you think of Amara's transformation? Do you think she made the right choice, letting the villain live to rot in prison? Or should she have finished the job? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this twisty mafia romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have plenty more secrets to uncover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.